Hello and welcome to my video today. I have some new items in from EVBase. We have a front and rear skid plates. These are made of aluminum to replace the fabric ones that are included with the vehicle. These are good for all versions of the Model 3 and Model Y. Should give some good protection for anything that you meet on the road. I'm going to unbox and install on my 2018 Model 3. So let's get started. And here we have the front skid plate box. Let me open it up and get a closer look. We have protective foam on top. Actually pretty thick. This is the warranty and support insert. If you have any questions, they have phone number, email, website, etc. And there's also a QR code for the installation manual. We have a bag here with bolts for installing the skid plate, and there's 8 of those. And here we have the skid plate. It looks really nice. There are several attachment points here. I see at least 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom, and also in this area here. I'm going to go over the instruction guide and I'll show you how to install it in the front of the vehicle. Here's a close-up view. Here is underneath. Let me check the thickness of the aluminum. I'm getting 0.08 inches, 2.2 millimeters. And now for the rear skid plate. More of that thick protective foam. And we have a bag of hardware. We have 6 bolts with washers, and we have 2 retention clips. And here we have the skid plate. There happens to be a little door here that's held in by 2 screws for accessing the rear motor drive. For the access panel here, you can use either a 3/16 or 5mm hex key on these 2 screws. And underneath, so I'll be installing this on the rear of the car. And here we have the front and rear skid plates next to each other, showing you the relative sizing. Here are the tools and supplies that you need for the project today. The bolts will require a 10mm socket. This one is attached to a ratchet wrench. You could also use a screwdriver. That came in handy a couple times when I had to have a further reach to get to them. In addition, there are 2 nuts for the front skid plate that requires a 15mm socket, or if you happen to have a 5/8 inch socket, that will work just as well. And then you can attach that to the socket wrench. And just in case if you need it, some work gloves. You need to get access to underneath the vehicle. If you have a lift in your garage, that will be perfect. But if you don't, something like rhino ramps here should help the process. I'm going to drive the car front first onto the ramps so that I can install the front skid plate. Then I'm going to turn the car around and back it up onto the ramps to do the rear skid plate. All right, so I have the two ramps ready here, roughly 75 inches from the outside of the ramp to the outside of the other ramp. Slowly going to move the car up the ramps. And for some extra safety, I'm going to put some wheel chocks behind the rear wheels. So here we are underneath the front of the car. We have the fabric shield. There are 4 10mm bolts that hold this in right here. Another one in the center. Then we have 2 in the far end of it. So let's take these off. Okay, I got the 4 in the front removed. Now to do the ones in the back. Okay, all the bolts should be out. This should come down. There are 2 more bolts that you need to do that are part of the other skid plate that I installed a little while ago. This one protects the hoses, so this one you just need to loosen a little bit, and there we go. Let me pull that out of the way. There may be some debris in that panel, so now I have to vacuum off this area. Here's a look at the original 10mm bolt that held the trim in place under the car. Here's the replacement one. The biggest difference is that there's a locking washer right here. So when we install this, this will lock in place, holding that metal piece and keep it from moving. So I do recommend using the new bolts rather than the existing ones. To make this easier to install, I am going to put a box underneath to lift it up. This should make things a lot easier. So let me move this up and insert the box here. Could be any box, about a foot tall or so should help. Then you can use this to line up the skid plate. To where it's supposed to go. If you have any debris under here, it's good to clean it out before we install this. It is really close to where it's supposed to be. So I am going to insert the new bolts, just line everything up, and I am just going to hand thread the bolts in for right now. And I'm going to tighten these up, not too snug yet, so I need to align the rear bolts, so I don't want this too tight yet, but I just want it tight enough so it's holding on. All right, I'm going to move the box out of the way so we can see better back here. I'm going to need to remove these 2 skid plates from either side so that this can fit underneath. Can't really do that at this point. All right, so I got the 2 on the ends done. Now I can do the 2 that go in here. Here's a close-up of me inserting the new bolts into the opening. Recommend doing it by hand. All right, so it is now threaded, and I can take the wrench and torque it the rest of the way. All right, when these are snug, we are all set. So do that to all of the new bolts that we've installed. Okay, let's get this nut right here. All right, so I've got the nut on. So I find I have to tighten this corner in really nicely. All right, so this corner has to be in really tight for this nut to fit over that bolt. All right, so let's get the nut in position right there. All right, so that is nice and tight. And the last thing we need to do is install the bolt right here. Right like that. All right, that last screw is now going in. All right, now I can use the ratchet to get the rest of the torque. All right, so here we go. We have the 4 10mm bolts back here. There are 2 nuts here. And then in the front, we have 4 more 10mm bolts and 1 in the middle. And that one I still need to do. So let me go and do that now. Now that the rear is done, I am going to finally torque these guys down. All right, these are all snug. I got 1 more in the center right here. So here's a look at the final installation for the front skid plate. We have the 5 10mm bolts in the front. We have 4 in the rear, and then 2 locking nuts. I like the way it looks. Should give plenty of protection for this crucial area of the vehicle. And I'm sure it'll give many years of good service. If you ever do need to remove it, just do the opposite of what I just showed so that you can access the area underneath. So it's totally reversible. At this point, I'm going to drive the car down the ramp and turn it around, back it up so that I can access that area so I can install the rear skid plate. I'm now by the rear bumper of the car. Here is the fabric shield that we're going to have to remove. There are 2 10mm bolts right here. There are 3 in the center. A little further down, we have another 2 on either side. And then all along that back row there are 6. Altogether, 13 bolts. So I'm going to remove them all right now. By the way, I'm going to leave this middle one here for last to make it easier to get to the other ones. And the last one is right here. All right, so this should come right down, so support it evenly. Let it drop. I'm gonna remove any of the debris in this area. Gonna clean that up. Just like before, I'm gonna put something underneath the skid plate so it makes it easier for installation. Couldn't use the same box as before. It was too tall. So let me get this one and then kind of move it so that it's close to the position we want it to go in. And I'm gonna start putting the bolts in one by one. Remember just to do these loosely. I did 2 on the right, now I'm gonna do 2 on the left. And now I'm gonna do 2 in the front. If you can't find the hole that it's supposed to go into, make sure you press the skid plate all the way up and then you should be able to find it. Should make things easier. And remember, I'm just doing about 3/4 of the full tightness just to make sure everything lines up. All right, at this point, we have all of the bolts loosely tightened. We have 6 in that front row. We have 2 on the sides, another 2 on the sides going back, and then 1 in the center. And then in the very back here, we have 2 more. So a total of 13 bolts. For my situation, I did not need to use the retention clip. On some of the vehicles, you may need to do that if this is tied into other trim pieces. So I didn't have that situation. So at this point, I'm going to go and tighten all 13 of these bolts now that everything is fitted in the proper position. So here we have the rear skid plate installed. Compared to the front, I think the rear was easier, even though it had more bolts. For some reason, I think the shape of it and being smaller, I found it not to be a problem at all. As far as the results, I am very happy with it. Very solid. This will be a key in keeping the under motor area of both the front and the rear safe. Also, there's lots of components between the battery and the bumper that needs to be protected. One of the shortcomings with this is that it didn't come with enough bolts to replace all the existing ones. For the front, I had to do that for a couple, and for the rear, I had to do that for quite a few since there were 13 bolts and only 7 came in the kit. And as I mentioned, I didn't need to use the retaining clips since my fabric underlayment panels did not attach to any other areas besides the bolts. And that's about it. Pretty simple to install. I do recommend being very careful when you're working underneath the car. As you may have noticed, I put extra jack stands in front by the battery jack points, just in case there were any issues with the stands. And also make sure you use chocks for the opposite wheels so that it will not roll, even though the car is parked with the brakes on. Anytime you work underneath the car, take extreme caution and be prepared. Otherwise, I'm very happy with this. If you are interested in purchasing the front or rear, or the combination of front and rear skid pads, I have the links in the video description. Don't forget to use code RANGER for a discount of 20%. And that's about it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.